it's Father Hayes, and we are coming to you again with one of our videos in our series on the Mass. We have been talking in recent videos on the Liturgy of the Word. So our last video we talked about the responsorial psalm, and then now we're going to talk about the second reading in the Liturgy of the Word. So normally you have a Sunday cycle, which also is used on feast days, solemnities, special occasions, if they fall on the weekday. And then you'll have the weekday cycle. So in the weekday cycle, we don't typically have a second reading, but in the Sunday cycle, we'll have the first reading, which is usually from the Old Testament, followed by the responsorial psalm, and then a second reading. The second reading is primarily taken from the letters of the New Testament, or some of the writings of the New Testament other than the Gospel. So one of the things to remember about this is, first and foremost, the Old Testament, especially for the early church, was the scriptures of the church. The epistles, the letters, primarily the letters of Paul, but also we have a few letters from James and John. Those were written primarily before the Gospels. Most likely the first gospel, the Gospel of Mark, was written after Paul was martyred. Peter and Paul were martyred. So some of the early writings of the church were coming from Paul and some of the other apostles that were out establishing the churches and cultivating the churches throughout the Roman Empire. What we see with these letters, the reason they're part of the Bible is that they are seen as inspired by God. So God is ultimately the primary author. Paul's letter to the Philippians, the primary author is seen as God, working through the human author, Paul. So they're inspired scripture. But their purpose for being written was usually they're being written to specific churches. So Paul was writing the letter to the Philippians to the church in Philippi. Paul's letter to the Romans is to the church in Rome itself. Okay, and these were often to address specific issues or questions that were arising in these early days and early years of the church. But these letters were written precisely to be read at the Mass, because that was when the community was gathering. So if there was an issue to be addressed or a theological point to be made, that would be where the whole community would be gathered. For example, in the first letter to the Thessalonians, Paul says, "I urge you by the Lord that this letter be read to all the brothers." Well, when would they all be gathered? At the Mass. And the book of Revelation also says, "Blessed is the one who reads aloud, and blessed are those who listen to this prophetic message." So these letters in the Gospel, in the New Testament, were originally intended to be read to the congregation during the liturgy. And so what they do is they give us a bit of a glimpse into some of the problems and the progress that was being made in the church's first generation. At the same time, though, because they are inspired scripture, God is continuing to reveal himself to his people. And so that's why the letters have, just like the Gospel, just like the Old Testament, have many layers that we can unpack and really chew on. And so just like with the first reading, our posture at Mass should be attentively listening, having that mode of receptivity. And we want to remember the model of this mode of receptivity is Our Lady. She was the one who conceived the Word in her heart before she conceived the Word in her womb, right? She was receptive, and she was allowing God to fill her with his revelation and ultimately with his very self. And so that's a little overview of the second reading within the Liturgy of the Word. So I hope you found this helpful, and we look forward to seeing you in future videos. God bless.